All right, so welcome to the second part of this lesson. For this lesson, what we're going to be talking about is how the text actually communicates the message, right? We're talking about textual analysis, and this time we're working with how a text communicates a particular message. So I've got a few different questions to help you with that. But you started this already last week. This is exactly what you did when you did your visual analysis. I asked you to think about how the visual elements of the text generated a particular idea, how they made you feel, how they communicated message and meaning. The two questions: what message is the text communicating, and how does the text communicate that message, are connected. You kind of figure them out together. As you start to look at the way the text is constructed, you start to figure out the message. The same thing's going to happen now, only now you're looking at a written text instead of a visual text. So instead of things like shape and color and line, we're going to be thinking about things like, how does the text begin? How does the writer set up the topic and the claims that are going to be made? Maybe instead of looking at color, right, we look at the language. What kind of language is it? What is evoked by the language? If emotions are evoked by colors, they're also evoked by words. Are the words really technical? Are they really slangy? Like, what tone does the language end up setting up or creating? How does it make you feel? How does the language help develop the message being communicated by the text? In addition, what kind of information does that text provide? If lines and shapes are maybe the evidence in a visual text, then information is the evidence in a written text. And we have to think about what kind of information the text provides. Do they have tons of scientific studies and data and that kind of information? Do they give you lots and lots of stories from people who've gone through it? We call those anecdotes. So anecdotal evidence is evidence built from anecdotes. Do they have like figurative language and fancy phrases and really beautiful poetic ways of talking about it? Do they have descriptions of things that make you feel strong emotions, like, goriness, or really like descriptions of sadness? Like what are they using to try to convince you to provide evidence for the claims that they're making? And then you think about maybe how the text is organized. Maybe this corresponds to shape, right? What is the shape of the written text? Does it build up like through little ideas to a big idea? Does it present a clear claim early on and then provide evidence for the claim? Does it have is it real logical and move from one point to the next in a really chronological way? Does it jump around a lot? Is it easy to follow? Is it, what's the shape of the text? And how does it end? We looked at how does it begin? Well, how does it end? How does the writer wrap up what they're saying? The beginning and ending are especially important parts of any given text. So I'm going to use that set of questions that I just talked about to analyze the text that I had you all read at the beginning of this lesson. 1 year later, was Game of Thrones finale really that bad? So that's sort of the title, right? That's another aspect that you want to look at that I forgot to put in that list of questions, but that's totally relevant. 1 year later, is it really that bad? So that's kind of a setup right there, is when we look at the title. But if we look at how does the writer set up the topic? In this case, we see, does our TV show's ending invalidate what came before? The writer sets up, instead of just jumping right to the Game of Thrones, we see this person kind of set up a bigger question. What is the nature of a TV show, right? The writer's name is Nate Jones. We can see up here, so we'll refer to them as Jones. So setting up a bigger picture idea rather than just jumping right into the topic. But it's not unrelated. It's not like, since the dawn of time, blah, blah, blah. No, it's really related to what they're going to be talking about. Like, what's the role of the ending in a TV show? And then Jones answers that question. I don't think so. So we're going to get an answer immediately. He doesn't wait and let us try to figure out the answer. He's like, nope, let me tell you the answer. I don't think so. And then he gives examples. So this brings me to another question that I asked, is what kinds of evidence is this writer providing? This writer is giving evidence right off the bat. Lost and Battlestar Galactica remain stirring examples of the golden age of TV, even if their last episodes were silly. So those two examples are like, he's saying they're good texts, even if they had bad endings. Okay, maybe that's what he's going to say about Game of Thrones. I don't know. He's setting it up. He's setting up this overall question of like, the ending doesn't have to make the show bad. Then he also goes on and uses a third example, Breaking Bad. Breaking Bad's cop-out of a finale didn't taint the series that preceded it, or for that matter, the one that followed. So talking about Better Call Saul. Still is a sign, if we're looking at what kind of language is used, still is a sign that maybe there's going to be a shift here. So I thought I was being set up to be like, oh, the ending is not necessarily going to hurt the show. But then when the writer says still, I'm like, wait, that means a shift in language. So a subpar ending then often leaves a sour taste in fans' mouths, like someone ripping a fart while walking out of a delightful dinner party. Okay, so there's a lot going on in this sentence that I really like. First off, the language still lets me know that the writer is going to shift away from what they just set up and maybe offer us a different point of view. In this case, the different point of view is, yeah, the ending does matter. At least in this case, it's possible that the ending matters. If it's a subpar ending, we're going to get a sour taste in our mouth. And then the writer does something really funny with language where they juxtapose two ideas that don't usually go together, like ripping a fart, which is a real casual phrase, right, with slang in it, versus walking out of a delightful dinner party, which I read with an English accent because to me it sounds very prim and proper. So if we mix ripping a fart with walking out of a delightful dinner party, that's wrong. That just feels wrong. Something's wrong there. And that creates, it made me laugh when I read that line. I think because of that weird juxtaposition of the slang ripping a fart with the funny, delightful dinner party. And then here's where we really get to this writer's argument. We had to get through the whole first paragraph. Case in point. Case in point means I'm going to give you this example that proves what I just said. And what I just said was a subpar ending often leaves a sour taste in fans' mouths. So I'm like, oh, okay, now I know we're getting to the heart of the argument here. The Game of Thrones finale, which was so widely disparaged upon its arrival 1 year ago, that it almost retroactively invalidated everything good ever said about the series. The example here is the series was good, but the finale kind of messed up the whole series, right? So that's going to be getting to the main part of this writer's argument. Then they're going to be suggesting that maybe it was bad, this Game of Thrones ending. So then the writer goes on to use another kind of evidence, which is a quote from somebody else, right? That's another type of evidence that you can use to try to convince people. So in the quote, it says a mishmash of poignant moments and puzzling turns, wrote the New York Times recap. So that means there were these good parts, the poignant moments, but the puzzling turns means like we were puzzled, we didn't understand it. It made us rethink and think again. Then another quote comes in, topples all of the show's carefully crafted credibility, raved Vulture. Notice this is Vulture that we're reading this on. So Vulture's quoting themselves. They're saying like, we said this back then, and they're reminding us that they said it. And that's another strategy, is to sort of show us what you said before and then recontextualize it. So they're saying that people, including Vulture and the New York Times, didn't love it at the time. With some notable exceptions, a consensus emerged that Thrones had turned in one of the worst finales of all times. Here, with some notable exceptions, they're doing a thing where they're acknowledging that there's opposition. They're like, oh, yes, some people didn't think this, so I'm acknowledging that some people didn't think it, but I'm going to go on and argue that most people, a consensus, most people thought that it was bad. It was one of the worst finales of all time. And here we get this very intense language, right? It's not just a bad finale. One of the worst of all time. It's hyperbole. It's exaggeration, exaggerated language. That's to like really slam in the idea. So after 8 seasons of buildup, the most buzzed about series of the decade, again, listen to this really highfalutin, exaggerated language. 8 seasons, most buzz about series of the decade, ended with one major character dead, another exiled, and Bran Stark is king of the 7, wait, they slashed it out, 6 kingdoms. After all of this buildup, then I'm just going to list the things that happen in this really non-dramatic, anticlimactic way. One character's dead, another's exiled, and Bran is the king. It was all built up, and then the language itself is deflated. Instead of being all hyperbolic and excited, the language is like, blah, very matter of fact, all of a sudden in that sentence. And then the little 7xxx6 thing is an inside joke for people who watch the series, understanding like one of the kingdoms wasn't part of the 7 anymore. I'm not going to spoil it for you if you haven't watched it. You can watch it. That's their point. And then they finish this sentence with a denouement. Denouement means ending or resolution. That's just fancy literary language. A denouement that seemed to offer little dramatic payoff or thematic resolution. So they're just saying the denouement didn't do what a denouement is supposed to do. Thematic resolution is the point of the denouement, and it didn't do it. So the ending didn't do what an ending's supposed to do, this writer's saying. Audiences hated it. So they're just reiterating people didn't like that. They introduced the idea that it's true that an ending doesn't have to ruin a show, but that's not the case with Game of Thrones, they said. Then they gave us a paragraph. Here of their argument. This is really the heart of the argument. Now down here, the context is everything. So they're going to maybe give us a little bit more nuance in this paragraph. If we're looking at organization, it's like introduce the idea, give us the real meat of the argument, and then give us some nuance. Context is everything. Before the finale aired, viewers were already primed for outrage. The episode came on the heels of 2 abbreviated seasons that marked a sharp drop-off in quality, full of hollow characterizations, slapdash pacing, and plotting that all but abandoned traditional notions of cause and effect. So that big old mega sentence there is just talking about before the last show, before the very ending, people already were angry with the show because it had dropped in quality. That's what all these little examples are. Hollow characterization is something that people don't like in TV shows. They want the characterization to be round, not hollow. Slapdash pacing. You want pacing to make sense, not to be all over the place. And plotting that abandons traditional notions of cause and effect. So the plot no longer even gives you reasons for things that make any sense. So these are all things that for me, if I'm a TV series watcher, I want plots to make sense. I want those things. I mean, maybe I want a twist, sure, but it needs to make sense ultimately for me. So I'm agreeing with what this person is saying here. And then 1 week before the finale, the episode The Bells sparked a full-on revolt as the beloved Daenerys Targaryen embraced her inner Curtis LeMay and became the show's ultimate villain, a heel turn many fans could not abide. Before the finale, this horrible, horrible thing happened in an episode, according to this writer, and it was a heel turn. So a heel turn is where you stop and flip all the way around. Not 360, not all the way, but 180, a 180 turn. Fans couldn't abide it. In this atmosphere, the discourse was primed to amplify the finale's faults and overlook its strengths. They're saying, yes, the finale sucked, but we all kind of like were in a frenzy of anger at that point, so maybe we were going to overlook any strengths that the finale had. So there's the but, like, okay, we were all kind of freaking out right then, so maybe we overreact. But then in the last paragraph here, or I guess the second to last paragraph, we get right back to the overall main argument, right? Which is, a year on from the finale, I attempted an experiment. What if you stripped away all of this and considered the Game of Thrones finale with fresh eyes? With 12 months of hindsight, is the episode really as terrible as it seemed back in 2019? And then the answer is yes. The ultimate answer then to this title is 1 year later, was the Game of Thrones finale really that bad? Is pretty clear here at the end. Yes. They make it very clear. There's no ambiguity there. Yes, it was terrible. The strategy that the writer's using is basically to set up, like, I'm a fair person. I think of other perspectives, but even though I'm willing to acknowledge these other perspectives, the endings still suck. And that setting up other perspectives is a way of bringing himself authority and making him seem like, oh, this is a reasonable writer. I should listen to them. So that's how I would go about analyzing a text. Now, it's your turn.